The liberals! Imagine for 1 second you're the almighty Sargon of Akkad, also known as Sargon the Great, the first ruler of the Akkadian Empire and the first great emperor of history, thousands and thousands of years ago. You pretty much conquered Sumer, Upper Mesopotamia, Elam, and Marhashi, and at least most of the ancient Middle East. You've inspired countless Assyrian and Babylonian leaders to follow your example, and within your wisdom, you've pretty much made an empire worth the history books. You're pretty much a historical figure with great legacy that you've left behind, and you think to yourself, nobody's going to taint your historical reputation ever, right? Now imagine for 1 second this British schmuck has tainted your legacy and reputation by tweeting a Labour MP he wouldn't even rape her. Benjamin, Sargon of fucking Akkad, or as I like to call him, Gorgon of Acclaim, a YouTube alt-right personality with quite a controversial history in contrast with the Akkadian emperor he's picked his name from. He's reached to a point where he's despised by not just leftists like yours truly, but also by the alt-right itself, to the point of utter mockery and shaming. But who is Sargon of Akkad, and what has he done to deserve such a treatment? Well, after a mild success I had with our Jordan Peterson documentary, I decided I will tell you the whole story of Carl Benjamin, from his humble days of Kyrgyzstani skeptic pig-praying anti-SJW to the days of his political demise. So grab your trusty bag of Marjo popcorn, because this is going to be a roller coaster ride of intellectual excitement. Ladies and gentlemen, I present to you Sargon of Akkad.
I just want to clear up a little confusion with the guys about the right reasons and the wrong reasons to hate on Twilight.
People are allowed reasons that aren't your own, but go ahead, let's hear it.
Carl Benjamin was born in 1979 in a family in Swindon, a proper British family, mate. And surprisingly enough, not much is known about his childhood or teenage years aside of a few gossip points coming from the dreaded website Kiwi Farms and what he has to spew over. Bear with me, I will obviously be sourcing the already zombified corpse of Kiwi Farms for this video. He usually was a subpar student getting bad grades at education, and he was booted out of college because of his bad school performance, and not to say because he was too busy diving himself into fantasy worlds of Warhammer and RPGs. He once had his website or forum where he'd post his fantasy RPG stories where nobody will even give him a reply or feedback to, but something was clearly evident. His IQ was scraping the bottom of his fantasy elf La La Land for more than he actually put the effort of being a decent student. By 2013, Anita Sarkeesian will reach the status of known public figure thanks to the criticism of patriarchal standards in games and media, especially in her series Tropes vs. Woman, which was crowdfunded on Kickstarter. Why am I obviously derailing this topic into Anita Sarkeesian precisely? Well, surprisingly enough, this was enough reason for Sargon to get pissed off at her. So in June 22nd, 2013, he jumped onto his potato toaster computer, started recording a bunch of nonsense on his garbage microphone at the time, and created his first YouTube video on the Sargon of Akkad channel. This video in particular was critical of Anita Sarkeesian, and by critical, I mean Carl Benjamin was just angrily clapping back at Anita Sarkeesian for a bunch of bullshit talking points.
How about you repeat after me? I don't know what men, or apparently women, think or why. And it's not my place to dictate to them anyway, so I'm going to stop making stupid assumptions because it makes me look like a fool.
The seed of Sargon's hatred of feminism was soon planted on his channel, and after that, he kept dunking on Anita Sarkeesian even more, and even keep dunking on feminists in general, with his garbage microphone and his potato computer. These videos were not as big as the rest of people back and then, the attacking Anita Sarkeesian, but he will not make it big until the hashtag Gamergate controversy in 2014, where his channel drew a lot of attention. This was due to its appearance on another similar podcast that was similarly critical of feminism called The Drunken Peasants, hosted by TJ Kirk, the amazing atheist. Today, TJ Kirk has cut ties with Sargon, but back then a clique was starting to form in the underbelly of YouTube's atheist community. Sargon was starting to gain popularity, and a lot of it, thanks to the whole Gamergate controversy, who will make video after video attacking feminists and the so-called social justice warriors alongside with snoopiers, and thus began the era of the YouTube skeptic.
It does just beggar belief on the scale of creating her own fabricated sexist comments such that she can claim that she's persecuted.
In 2014 alone, one of the most dominant Gamergater figures to dominate the YouTube scene was a figure of the atheist to YouTube skeptic. YouTube skeptics dominated the scene with public figures like not just Sargon of Akkad, but also people like Thunderfoot, Internet Aristocrat, known later as Mr. Medicare, Mundane Matt, The Amazing Atheist, Maddox, Davis Orini, and so on. It will be pretty obvious to say that the YouTube skeptic scene, in which Sargon was a member of, was pretty much a gateway for viewers to the alt-right later, often radicalizing people into the right-wing pipeline originated from the Gamergate controversy, which I need to remind you is a harassment campaign against female and marginalized game developers, game journalists, and gaming figures. In between the conspiracy theories that Sargon or people like the Golden One will spout, like the cultural Marxism thing and the sort, there was a certain nugget of brain rot that people like Sargon will usually ponder upon to their viewers. There was the belief that game researchers like Digital Game Research Association or DIGRA was a feminist or a stupid conspiracy to dismantle hegemonic masculinity, whatever that means, and they also believed that DIGRA members had their research funded by DARPA and other US federal government organizations, so DIGRA and other game researchers will be somehow using games for feminist behavioral control experiments, pushing a social justice agenda. This obviously is a load of bull. DIGRA's work doesn't have to be necessarily feminist or about feminism. It's just a professional organization where some gamer scholars presented their work on occasion, and a lot of times it doesn't necessarily have anything to do with feminism. But regardless, this lie was perpetuated by people like Sargon and other Gamergaters in hopes that maybe some 4chan poll or VE people could justify harassing some women and minorities. And of course, as expected, women and minorities were harassed during this time period thanks to Sargon's peddling bullshit. There was at one point a usual criticism from skeptics like Sargon to Anita Sarkeesian that mentioned how Anita didn't deliver a product worth of the Kickstarter money she's got. For normal people like you and me, this will be understandable on Anita's part because no matter how much funding you get in a video series, there's still obvious limitations of not overproducing said media. But obviously, Sargon wouldn't scam Kickstarter backers like that, would he? Allow me to introduce you to Necromancer, a Kickstarter game made by Sargon and 2 other guys. Those who are probably deep into Sargon lore will know that Sargon is a chronic e-bagger at these sorts of things, but hey, when Sargon does it, it's fine. When Anita Sarkeesian does it, it's a scam. Kinda works. Apparently Necromancer was a sort of mobile tower defense game where you take the role of a necromancer provoking the zombie apocalypse. You have to kill all the heroes.
Hi, I'm Russ.
And I'm Carl.
And we're 2/3 of Otherworld Software. We'd like to present Necromancer, something we like to call a reverse zombie apocalypse game.
You and the Necromancer are risen from the grave and determined to start the zombie apocalypse. To achieve this, you have an army of mindless, shambling zombies that you can raise to do your bidding. It won't be that easy though, as against you are a group of survivors and heroes who know what you're doing and are coming to stop you, and they are good at killing zombies. If you like the sound of this, please pledge now to help kickstart the zombie apocalypse.
Notably, it was just a Unity asset flip game with store assets and the sort, that ran below double-digit FPS unless you had the best Intel graphics in town. Weird how Sargon originally got away with this, because 2 years later, the project will be canned due to conflicts with 1/3 of the development team, more precisely the artist behind the supposed graphic assets of the game. It is uncertain whether Sargon fully refunded his backers after cancelling the game, but it seems a bit ironic since Carl will criticize Anita's education for supposedly the same thing. Moving on to this YouTube content, this will be the point where Sargon will start his iconic series, This Week in Stupid, where he will bash feminism and Jews in BuzzFeed articles and the sort. Here's where Sargon's usual tactic for debate or response video rather usually works. His whole method of response video is inserting his own mocking commentary at frequent intervals into an opponent's video, what I usually call the Mr. Medicare method, and as a result, Carl tends to quote-mine his subjects, presenting a fractured or tormented view of their positions. When Sargon gives his final rebuttal at the end, his opponent has already been established, at least to his devout viewers and fans, as untrustworthy. And this Mr. Medicare method from Carl Benjamin worked for a time because he remained safe within the scope of his own channel, remaining as his only effective way he could quote-unquote debate someone without entering an actual live debate. Here's where the real problems for Sargon arise though. Sargon is incompetent, or rather weaker, at actual live debate, and much less effective there because he's not well versed in actual live debate methods. I want you to remember this because it's an icky subject we'll tackle later in this video. Regardless, it all went fine and dandy for Sargon for a while, where he rejoiced the amount of subscribers and views he was getting for his really unhinged views on feminism and zhuzh at this time, and he garnered to this day nearly 1 million subscribers from the most dedicated bigots on the platform. That is, until he encountered his first issue. In June 2015, one of his videos responding to The Guardian was copyright struck by The Guardian itself, leaving Sargon with an excuse to feel like a martyr of censorship for a while. The Guardian tried to justify this by saying it was offering advice on how to engage The Guardian content without breaching copyright, but because Carl was basically now having a reason to cry censorship and led to many innocent interpretations for his libertarian right-to-it fans, it was taken as an alarming case of using copyright law to stifle debate from the public square, according to a journalist of the Los Angeles Times. Regardless, it was clearly evident that Sargon had no filter when acting like a massive douche online. In May 2016, after the Labour MP Jess Phillips tweeted denouncing cases of sexual assault, Sargon did really pull a big brainer and responded Jess Phillips with "I wouldn't even rape you, hashtag anti-rape threats, hashtag feminism is cancer." He subsequently doubled this down in a YouTube video. I couldn't find this video myself, but what it seems to be is that this very tweet will haunt Carl for a good while. But it's something I'll also tackle later into this video, so for the time being, save it in your brain pocket for a while. We'll come back to it later. In terms of other sorts of regrettable comments he made a series of comments on a live stream with the Justicar about child sex, which will probably come back to bite his ass later.
I was well under the age of 11 when I started having sex, and so what I like to do is put people on the other side of the argument. It's like, what you have to do is you have to say that someone like me, not anybody else, but me, that I was too stupid to appreciate the nature and quality of what I was doing at the time. So please convince me I didn't know what I was doing.
Yeah, I think it's, it depends on the child, really, doesn't it? Because some kids.
That's what the Catholics say.
Well, it's true, and it's true though. It should really be a case-by-case basis. But I can see why the whole thing. But it's not really something I'd ever put too much thought into.
For many people, this will have seemed like Sargon was pretty fine with child rape.
Hi there, would you like to sign my petition?
Oh yeah, this is probably one of the first times Sargon kicked off his political activity by starting a completely bonkers petition on Change.org demanding to suspend social justice courses to universities. Not a specific university, mind you, not the University of Oxford, not the University of Cambridge, not the Hustlers University. Universities in general. He didn't even bother to write a proper demand letter to universities. You see, it's horrible for Carl when social justice censors and destroys Carl's free speech, but when Carl will be more than happy to censor and destroy social justice's free speech by suspending social justice courses from universities all over the world. The petition ended up being completely destroyed because only a third of Sargon's subscriber base at the time, or even less than that, which is 80,000 people, signed the petition.
Close enough.
In the end though, it seems like if Sargon was getting a lot of more traction than usual back then, and getting new friends on the way with his whole YouTube skeptic dilemma, which brings to this peak in 2016 with a bigger racist clique that will ruin a meme.
Normies, get out!
All hail Kekistan! Praise Kek!
By the end of 2016, Donald J. Trump won the election in the United States. It is still somewhat uncertain to this day what kind of electoral science did lead to his victory, but a lot of people, even myself, did speculations about the subject. More specifically, 4chan's poll board came up with his own totally proven theory on how Trump won the election. So, to put it simply, there's this Egyptian god called Kek, who's a god of chaos and is often represented as a frog-headed humanoid. Somehow, a 4chan user on the poll board's Trump thread that summoned this ancient god by coincidentally posting "Trump will win" with a post ID of multiple 7s in a row. Since Kek loves repeated patterns of numbers, he has been somehow summoned by these sheer power of Pepe memes, and coincidentally, Kek also resembles that famous Pepe the Frog meme. You know, the meme that the alt-right is spamming all the time in 2016. There's also this old song that resurfaced in 2016 from a band coincidentally called Pepe, called Chatelet, which somehow powered up the meme chaos magic to greater levels. And through Kek's meme magic of Pepe, Chatelet and all, Trump won the 2016 US general election. Now this theory, to put it lightly, it's a load of horseshit and is completely bonkers, but it's a theory that people like Sargon did buy into, enough to spearhead the Kekistani movement in honor of the fictional Kek god and all the memes that surround him. Now, the concept of Kekistan as a fictional country representing this meme magic miracle did not surface until December 14th, 2016, where some 4chan user wanted to buy off an island and people suggested to name it as such, Kekistan. It was not until January 30th, 2017, a short while after Trump was declared president, when Sargon did launch this Kekistan initiative into motion. He tweeted demanding Kekistanis to be a genuine ethnicity, despite the fact that it just refers to a bunch of white shitposters from the alt-right. And thus, even the Kekistan flag was born, where its close resemblance to the Nazi Germany's war flag, and thus its status as a hate symbol, made the concept of Kekistan spread like wildfire through memes. This somehow boosted even more the YouTube skeptic clique and unified them even more through the concept of Kekistan alone. And this was clearly evident later in the same year, in 2017, when Anita Sarkeesian had a panel at VidCon discussing online harassment towards women. This is pretty much where Sargon presented himself and a bunch of other Kekistani YouTubers to record Anita and harass her even more on her own panel, filling one half of the first 3 rows of the audience of the panel. Later that day, Sargon had his photo of all the gang with a Kekistani flag with them. You can easily notice other YouTubers like Mundane Matt or Maddox next to him and the flag. Pretty much, this unsurprisingly enough did seem to bring the support of white supremacists and neo-Nazis on the internet, and here's where the real problems began. You see, despite Sargon being himself some sort of gateway to the alt-right, and this is said by the owner of the Daily Stormer, Andrew Anglin, and even then, while Sargon helps more the cause of the alt-right more than he does harm to it, he despises Nazis, the alt-right, and their viewpoints of being against race mixing, their use of scientific racism, and the promotion of racial segregation. He wanted to avoid being associated with neo-Nazis, even though he was supportive of Britain's EDL under the lead of Tommy Robinson, a well-known neo-Nazi in the UK. So, in order to further distance himself from neo-Nazis on Twitter and such, did he A. not spread the white supremacist ideology on social media, B. Block the white supremacists and the alt-right on Twitter, or C. Tweet hardcore gay porn to the alt-right on Twitter so they can possibly block him and distance themselves from him. Take a wild guess. I'll give you a few seconds to figure out the answer to this one. The answer is C. I mean, what do you fucking expect from such a galaxy brain? In fact, this was such a high IQ move from Carl that he eventually got mass flagged on Twitter and suspended from Twitter indefinitely.
Hello folks, as you can see, I've been suspended from Twitter. And I don't know why, because I didn't do anything.
It was not the only time this year where Sargon did find himself in more trouble with the alt-right than anything else. Sargon additionally claimed his grandfather was black, later admitting his grandfather was not black but mixed ethnicity. The sources of this are basically on Trust Me Bro levels of doubt-inducing racism. Now, despite all of this, the alt-right did buy into it, and they started considering Carl a not racially poor person. So you can imagine what kind of expected cringe-worthy insults from the alt-right would throw at Sargon. To make matters worse, after violence escalation of the 2017 Charlottesville Unite the Right rally, Sargon released a video contradicting himself on denouncing the alt-right but agreeing on the alt-right on legitimizing their viewpoints, such as a claim that Heather Heyer, a well-known victim of violence in Charlottesville who died run over by a car, has only had a heart attack and died because of it. This claim has been debunked so many times that I don't need a section in this video explaining how. You can do the research yourself on its appropriate sources. It didn't help either that, thanks to the pressure of Right-Wing Watch's Jared Holt, he did 10 seconds of mere googling and proved himself wrong, followed by what about,
including perpetuating alt-right propaganda that Heather Heyer was not killed by a car attack at the Unite the Right earlier this year, but instead suffered a heart attack due to poor health. Okay, well if that's wrong, I'm happy to correct it. Let me just pause what I'm doing and do some googling. So I found this article on Newsweek. Charlottesville, Heather Heyer's cause of death has been revealed in a medical report. Okay. The anti-racism activist was killed at the white nationalist protest as a result of blunt force injury to the chest, according to a medical report that doesn't appear to be linked here. But I will take them at their word. Okay. The alt-right had lied. My goodness, I can't believe it. Both the far left and the alt-right are both a pack of liars. Imagine my shock. An early part of the discussion included Benjamin echoing white nationalist propaganda surrounding the murder of Heyer, a liberal counter-protester at the Unite the Right rally. Okay, so that's false. So I'm dealing with liars on both sides. But unlike you, Jared, I will make the correction as I have just done here. You won't. You'll do nothing. You'll carry on lying, because you are a giant fucking liar.
It has seemed like, due to his incompetence, Sargon has gained a multitude of enemies from both sides. On one hand, the left hates him for being a literal gateway to the alt-right pipeline, and on another, the right hates him for not wanting to side with them on literal eugenics. In which case, the mockery of Carl Benjamin only has just got started.
This is, you are, Jim, honestly, it's really weird watching you desperately try to make something of this, but it's actually not.
What did I desperately try to make out of crowds? What did I desperately try to make out of crowds?
There's a narrative here. I didn't know about any of this.
Sargon, you're like, I don't know what you do, Jim, and then you say, well, people are sending me information about you, so stop fucking lying. What did I do about crowds?
That doesn't give me a comprehensive understanding of the things you do. I don't spend time.
Wow, I don't know what you're doing, Sargon, but people are sending me information about what you're doing. Don't try that bullshit on me.
Bitch, that is not fucking what
Bitch, I'm being honest with you. What the fuck are you talking about? I don't know what Jim's up to when people send me information about Jim. Come on, don't lie so badly.
Dogman.
And here I am. Thank you, Sargon. Hello and welcome, Tom.
Have to especially consider that Carl has become the object of mockery from the alt-right and the far-right alike. It was pretty obvious Sargon wasn't really having the best optics here, especially in the eyes of people like Mr. Medicare or Richard Spencer. And speaking of this latter, on January 4th, 2018, Carl Benjamin had a live stream debate with well-known neo-Nazi Richard Spencer on the issue of scientific racism, and Sargon got humiliated. Given that Richard Spencer made it clear that Sargon is not as skillful at intellectual debate as he claims he is.
You're going to find this insulting. You think that you are more intelligent than you are, and that is a difficult place for you to be.
Remember how I said Sargon was pretty much incompetent at live debate compared to his response videos? At this point, it should be more than evident here, and this, unsurprisingly enough, and through the sheer influence of people like Mr. Medicare, Ethan Ralph, Andy Worski, Tonka So, and so on, with shows like The Kill Stream and Morning Kimate, launch a whole new trend of far-right infighting spectacle called or IBS for short. IBS is pretty straightforward. It is a constant competition of alt-right infighting and shenanigans where well-known bigots fight each other in verbal insults and maybe even worse to see who can humiliate their opponent, or as I like to call it, they're being other drama whores. It's surfacing from this time period many more people mocking Sargon and the skeptic friends like Monday Matt did surface, such as Dame Pesos, Jarbo the Hutt, you know, the usual alt-right troll figures that rejoice in their own anonymity to troll anyone like Sargon or even beyond. You can easily say that Sargon's debate with Richard Spencer did influence this trend. It is the response to the pedantic debates Sargon held on Google Hangouts on live streams with like-minded people, and it surely didn't benefit Carl Benjamin at all. This has earned too many enemies from the alt-right for Sargon. But Sargon didn't just gain enemies from the alt-right. During a panel talk at the London College the same year, Antifa raided Sargon's talk, eventually leading to Sargon stealing the Antifa flag as a trophy, like it was some sort of shitty children's capture the flag game. But more importantly, Sargon will have an excuse to lash out and clap back angrily at his haters. During the same year, Sargon has replied to these haters on Patreon private messages and other sorts of comments, and we responded in a way that will bring him to dire consequences.
I'm not an upper class twat. I come from fucking the most working class roots, at least my parents did. Jesus Christ, it's just like, you understand I'm a person, don't you? You know, you guys understand that I am a person, and yeah, you like sorry, Sarkeesian, how dare I hurt sensitive feelings. Look, you carry on, but don't expect me to then have a debate with one of your. Then why would I bother? Like, why would I bother? You act like an upper class type right now. Maybe you're just acting like. Have you considered that? Do you think white people act like this? White people are meant to be polite and respectful to one another. And you guys can't even act like white people? It's really, like, amazing to me.
People keep making fun of my high IQ, so they're all N-words. As an unsurprising result of Sargon lashing out like this to his Patreon detractors, his Patreon account ended up being suspended on December 2018 due to getting mass flagged by alt-right goons for his use of hate speech and slurs. This will eventually lead to a domino effect, where alt-right figures from the intellectual dark web like will flee Patreon, such as Sam Hyde, Jordan Peterson, and so on, in protest of Patreon's policies. Oh, it seems I cannot break Patreon's rules anymore freely, can I? It's clearly evident this is the long-term effect of internet blood sports and how Sargon and his skeptic friends have caused them, since he's usually one of the biggest targets of IBS. The sheer fact that Sargon was pretty much crumbling down like he's led to the rest of the Kyrgyzstani skeptics clique to crumble down as well. Mundane Matt has been caught, for instance, falsely flagging videos critical of him, leading to the infamous Boulders incident. Sargon and his skeptic butt buddies of the Gamergate past have been caught in the crosshair of humiliation, and this will only prove the beginning of his downfall.
So now this is precisely the sort of thing that we have a problem with zealots who decide that it's okay to assault people for having a different political opinion.
If you think I'm standing aside for somebody on this personal ego trip, I'm afraid that the voters will forget it. They've got to make a choice between a real party or a phony party. This is dead, very much so.
Before the Patreon ban though. In June 2018, it will be pretty much apparent Carl will still hold to his political moves. Benjamin, thanks to the help of the new UKIP leader Gerard Barron, joined UKIP altogether with InfoWars sidekick Paul Joseph Watson, closeted homophobe and Paradise Lost star Milo Yiannopoulos, and Nazi-saluting pug enabler Count Dankula, in order to take it over with a soft coup, which will lead to the total restoration of freedom in the United Kingdom, called the cringeworthy name War Plan Purple. Where UKIP followed suit, gaining additional popularity for a short boost, gaining around 500 new members. It was also very apparent that UKIP was turning further into the right wing by allowing former ADL leader Tommy Robinson to become Gerard Barron's advisor on grooming gangs. These new UKIP moves will plant a seed to a new disaster under the name of Carl Benjamin and those involved with him. And let me tell you, it's probably the funniest blunder ever pulled off by Carl and his political associates. For starters, these unwise decisions from the new UKIP leadership led to many famous UKIP politicians leave the party, especially because of the rising Islamophobia and extremism within it. And more importantly, UKIP's most famous, Nigel Farage, was one of those who abandoned ship before it could sink to form the new Brexit party later on. But the real disaster will not get started until May 2019, when the European Parliament's 2019 elections just began campaigning, and just so happens that our good old friend Sargon was running as an MEP for it. The results of this political campaign were one of the most disastrous and funniest blunders in political history. Here's the best stuff about the best disastrous moments of the UKIP campaign from Sargon. He gets thrown a milkshake. He gets skippered with a funny fish.
Excuse me. Excuse me.
He defended racial slurs as freedom of speech.
I'm not going to be apologising for my crimes against political correctness. I hate political correctness.
I'm not really interested in discussing any of these comments because you see, I've had something like 400 million views on my YouTube channels in total. I've got a huge audience that if people want to go see them, they can go watch them on my channel and see the context for themselves. Personally, I find racist jokes funny.
Many UKIP MEPs fled the party too, and yes, will you take a look at this, Jamie? Okay, let's see. Alright, it's a regrettable shit Sargon has said in the past that comes back to haunt him, and it is especially more important during this whole political campaign. Remember when Sargon said this in a live stream?
Yeah, I think it's, it depends on the child really, doesn't it? Because some kids...
That's what the Catholics say.
Well, that's one of the things that came back to bite Sargon's ass, and anyone who calls him out for that gets called jealous. Jealous for what? For raping children? But that's not the worst Sargon who had haunting him during his UKIP campaign. Oh no, you bet your ass it isn't. Remember what tweet Sargon did saying I wouldn't even rape you to Jess Phillips, the Labour MP? That sure stood a long time in your brain pocket. Now, you see, this is the old tweet that held the most scrutiny for a call, as it was the line that completely ruined the whole UKIP campaign. Now, on top of all of this, guess what Sargon did to these accusations? A. Not apologize at all. B. Justify himself as a YouTube comedian. Or C. Double down in his comments by attacking back Jess Phillips for unsubstantiated bullshit. I'll give you a few seconds. Fuck it. It's D. All of the above.
I asked you earlier on today about your decision to defend your candidate and his suggestion that he wouldn't even rate Labour MP Jess Phillips. So I would like to ask Carl Benjamin why you think it is acceptable to say on Twitter that you wouldn't even rate a female Labour MP.
Because I don't think women are any different to men in the way that we should treat them. Unlike the establishment, unlike our judges who literally say if you were a man, I would have sent you to jail, I think we should treat women the same as men. And that means if a woman is being a giant laughing at male suicide, I'm going to be a giant back to her. Any questions?
So it's acceptable?
Yes.
It is acceptable to joke about raping a woman.
100% deal with it.
Joe Biden didn't either help the situation.
You said it was a satirical comment. What did you mean by that?
Well, go and ask Carl Benjamin. This is a 3-year-old tweet that he did in the context of some Twitter trolling of what people were doing.
No, I'm not asking about the comments he made. I'm asking about your defence of his comments, because he remains a UKIP candidate and you are the leader of the party, and so you have made a decision to keep him as a candidate.
He has made an ill-considered remark, and if you were going to stop people taking part in public life or anything else because of some stupid, ill-considered remark of several years before, then I don't think you'd have anybody in Parliament or anywhere else in public life.
That kind of comment, though, has prompted some concerns.
How many times are you going to ask me the
voters?
same question? How many times are you going to ask me the same question? Thank you very much.
You could see this affected the public perception of not just UKIP in general, but more especially Carl Benjamin as well, as in an interview after interview, Sargon wouldn't stop acting like a complete clown trying to justify his nonsensical rape tweets.
Thanks for your comments. Claire says, this Carl Benjamin interview on your programme today has made me cry. He sounds just like my rapist, making people believe that it's all a joke and that women are hysterical.
And not only that, Carl's rape tweets were being investigated by police as well. Not sure what is the final outcome of this investigation as of today, but if there's any updates, I'll keep you updated on my social media. But this resulted in the final blunder of UKIP, losing the election for the European Parliament with around 3% of the vote, since even most of the people who were going to vote UKIP voted Farage's Brexit party. At this point, Sargon's YouTube channel ended up being demonetized entirely, leaving Sargon with little to no income coming for him, and it seemed it was the final nail in the coffin for Sargon of Akkad. As 2020 arrives with the whole COVID pandemic, Zohar Sargon got himself into a whole new political group, Hearts of Oak, with neo-Nazi Tommy Robinson and several former UKIP members. Carl might continue his political career thus far, but in his stubbornness to continue, he'll never realize his attempts at making a political impact are futile. It's pretty funny how Sargon will once try to disassociate so much with the far-right, when in fact he's even getting closer to their ideology. And even then, no matter how much rebranding he does to distance himself from these ill-considered remarks from the past, he still gets mocked by all sides of the political spectrum. He's nothing more than a joke in terms of politics. Sargon remains as an irrelevant political figure to this day, and an irrelevant political content creator, probably no longer being able to make as much income as he did back in his Kekistani skeptic days. To see Sargon fall like this is like seeing a train wreck in slow motion, a trash fire igniting in slow motion. You can't avoid watching, no matter what your political views are, and as a former Nazi and reform leftist, I can testify that watching Sargon slowly burn himself to misery is funny. And you'll know as a viewer that at least you don't have to know any more about Sargon. And that is more understandable you didn't know about Sargon until this video, because with only knowing the actual ancient Akkadian king, you'll find comfort. Because other than that, his ancient historical legacy has been tainted by a guy from Britain who told a Labour MP that he wouldn't even rape her. The only lesson that we can learn here is, you better think before you speak.
Gee, I hope nobody is taping this.